Welcome to the Breast Cancer Prevention Global Virtual Conference interview series. This interview has been presented to you by Thermography Clinic, Inc., because every woman should know her risk of breast cancer. For more information, please visit thermographyclinic.com.
My name is Dr. Christiane Northrup, and I'm a board-certified OBGyn physician. I have been a visionary pioneer in women's health, understanding that the state of a woman's health is influenced by her thoughts, her beliefs, the culture in which she is born, and so on. I've practiced bedside and in the OR and in the delivery room for many, many years. Now I devote my time, full time, to helping women flourish in their female bodies. I'm passionate about women's health because when I first saw birth as a medical student, I nearly fell to the floor in reverence. And I thought there's nothing this holy on earth, and that's what set me on my path. I absolutely feel that breast cancer is a preventable disease. When I look at the risk factors for it, so many of them are changeable. One would be women who exercise have far less breast cancer. Women who avoid alcohol have less breast cancer. And when there is a extreme loss in a woman's life, a divorce, loss of a job, loss of a child, this has actually been associated with an increased risk for breast cancer. But there's a way in which one can learn how to grieve properly and also how to relieve anger and resentment that fester in the body. All of these things and vitamin D levels need to be taken into consideration. In breast health, we need women to know that they can create breast health through their thoughts, through their behaviors, instead of what happens in this culture, which is being taught almost this way, that your breasts are two pre-malignant lesions sitting on your chest, and it's only a matter of time. But in the meantime, they better look perky, and you better get implants so that you can look like a Victoria's Secret model, but you better not nurse your baby in public. That's how confused this culture is about the breast and breast health. You know, grief is very, very interesting because the body knows how to deal with grief. If you look at a little baby and it gets hurt or it suffers from thinking you're not there, the baby will cry and then it will calm down. Movement, sound, tears. That's how we need to grieve. But what our culture does, it says, get over it. You know, you'll be okay. And so what women need to know is, I believe that grief actually creates a pressure in the cells. Now we know from psychoneuroimmunology and the work of Candace Pert that every thought we think has a biochemical reality in the body. We even know that there's DNA changes from chronic grief and anger and so on. And that's all biochemistry. We know from Masaru Emoto's work, Messages in Water, that water imprints emotions, and that water that you send love into is different when you freeze it and when you do the crystalline structure. It looks very different than water that has hatred in it. So in your very cells, when you have those emotions that are unexpressed, unacknowledged, they need to be moved. Emotion move the energy. And that's what proper grieving does. However, we are not taught in this culture that every emotion has a purpose. Every emotion signifies a genuine need. This is the work of Marshall Rosenberg, who founded the Center for Nonviolent Communication. And when you know that an emotion like anger signifies that there's a need you're not having met, but it isn't necessarily your husband or your child who needs to meet that need. You have the ability to get that need met, but first you have to acknowledge how angry you are, or how resentful you are, or how much grief you have. And when you don't acknowledge it, it gets stuck in the physical body. And it gets stuck in very specific places. And that's the whole chakra system. And I find that fascinating. For instance, our sense of safety and security in the world is affecting the immune system. We all need to belong, and we all need a sense of security and safety. That's first chakra, and that affects the blood and the immunity. After 9/11, here in Maine, our rate of heart attack tripled in 1 week because people's sense of safety and security was shattered for some time after that event. We are all subject to this, but all of us can learn how to work with these energies instead of be victimized by these energies. And I would really like women to understand that they no longer need to be victimized by the thought of breast cancer, because that's no way to live. It's the sword of Damocles hanging over your head. I love the idea that we could use something other than fear to motivate people. Biologically, we know that it is something like 7 times easier to get people to have blisters with hypnosis rather than cure them. So there's something about our central nervous system that is wired in by fight or flight. But we've gotten to the point in society where everything uses fear, everything. And so the only thing that's really sustainable is not fear, because people get numbed by it, is joy and ecstasy. And if we could get a sustainable message out, for instance, I mean, what are the breasts? They are symbolic of giving, my cup runneth over, and receiving. If you've nursed a child and you are then feeling unconditional love for a small child or a puppy or something that moves you, you'll actually feel that tingling of a milk letdown reflex years later. And I find that interesting. I like to say it is proof that the metaphor, the milk of human kindness, is actually real. And when you get that tingling letdown, we know that your oxytocin levels have just soared, and that's the bonding hormone, the hormone of love, which lowers blood pressure and increases immunity and so on. So what would be wonderful is to get this ecstasy, this wonderful feeling of bonding, the oxytocin rush, as what we're going for. And that would increase the circulation in the breasts, and it would decrease anger and resentment, and everyone would relax, would just relax. So I currently dance Argentine tango, which is a close embrace dance of the heart. And after an evening of dance, we walk out of there high. And I know that that's good for every cell in my body, not just the breast, but you're dancing literally 1 heart, 4 legs. And the breasts are involved. They've been called heart pillows. And so that's what is motivating to me, is to teach women just a 1/4 turn. These are not 2 premalignant lesions sitting on your chest. They're heart pillows. They are your symbols of giving and receiving. So what women need to do is actually be taught the fine art of receiving. And if you ask women to close their eyes and pick a number from 1 to 100 that represents the percentage of time that they're giving and not receiving, the vast majority will pick a number that is 90 or above. So learning to receive is extraordinarily important. And I don't mean narcissistic, you owe me, I want diamonds, all that. I'm just talking about receiving, the ability to receive love, to feel that you're worth it. And just in terms of marriages and male-female relationships, men actually love to give to a woman who knows how to receive. But if women don't know how to receive, there's no receptor site. So all of these potential heroes are running around trying to give to someone who doesn't know how to receive, and then we get all out of balance. And that's what's going on. So the fear of breast cancer is it's a canary in the coal mine in a way, but it's something that we focus on as a way to avoid all of the pain and grief about the fact that we've never been taught how precious we are. We've never been taught how to receive. And when you feel that, what you've missed out on, at first it's quite painful, but then after that comes joy. And so I think if we could teach women that these breasts, this heart, is a exquisite barometer for how well you're letting in your divine self. If they knew that, then they wouldn't be participating in this culture of fear where you go in for your annual mammogram and the tech or the doctor says, you're okay for another year, but you're only getting a stay of execution for another year. As one of my patients said to me once, thank God I was finally diagnosed with breast cancer, because I've been worrying about it my whole life. Now I've got it. You know, I can relax. Can you imagine? Instead of, if you had something like the combination of a thermogram and maybe a mammogram, you go for the thermogram, it shows that maybe there's a little excess heat over here, but not bad. So you go out and you change it. You look in the mirror every morning and you say, I love you. I really love you. Or you touch your breasts in the shower and you say, girls, you're safe with me. You do things like that. You go back for the other thermogram, it shows that the cellular inflammation is decreasing, and you realize, wait a minute, I have control over this. My thoughts, my emotions create my cells. I can do something about this. I'm not a victim. That's motivating. Nutrition is extraordinarily important. We know that women with the lowest vitamin D levels, for instance, have the highest rates of breast cancer and osteoporosis. And we've been having the sun vilified for the last 20 years. So people are terrified of the sun because of skin cancer. Meanwhile, all the things that vitamin D could help prevent, heart disease, all kinds of cancer, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, breast cancer, we don't hear about those. The average person needs about 5,000 international units of vitamin D per day to maintain optimal levels. We're at a new paradigm in nutrition where we've moved from RDAs, recommended daily allowance, to prevent a deficiency disease like scurvy, beriberi, pellagra, which we're not seeing so much anymore, to the new paradigm is what is optimal, not what will get by for an entire herd to keep from a deficiency disease, to what is optimal. And that's a different story. I'm very interested in optimal everything. Now, we know that people are eating in general in the Western world too many calories. And we have been very successful. The work of Dr. Robert Gundry, a cardiovascular surgeon in California, points out that from a gene point of view, from the passing on of genes, the standard American diet or the standard Canadian diet has been very successful. Girls and boys are reaching puberty at age 9 and 10, which means you pass on the genes, and then the very things that you were doing to bring you to early puberty will kill you off so that you're not available to eat the food supply. So that's successful. But if you would like to survive a long time, then you need to teach your genes how to keep you here. And the way to keep you here is to eat a lot of greens and a lot of dark green leafy vegetables, a lot of nutrient-rich foods that are not too high in calories. Agriculture created the civilizations that we have now. And unfortunately, agriculture has made it easy to sit on the couch and watch television because you don't have to hunt and gather and you don't have to do all of that work. I've just learned again from Dr. Gundry's work that they discovered a female pharaoh, the only Egyptian female pharaoh they've ever discovered. She died of diabetes and she was obese. She didn't have to work. and she ate a lot of corn and a lot of honey. So sweet foods, foods that are grain-based, white bread, bagels, all of this. I've come to believe that sugar is the biggest culprit in the diet. Too much sugar, which increases insulin, and then insulin creates a pathway of inflammatory chemicals in the body that are responsible for all of the chronic degenerative diseases, heart disease, arthritis, breast cancer, cancer in general. So all of that is nutrition based. When you start to eat a diet that is low glycemic, meaning it doesn't spike your blood sugar, and you have enough vitamins and minerals, the antioxidants and the minerals, and enough vitamin D and enough omega-3 fats, then you find that all this cellular inflammation goes away remarkably quickly. Dr. Dean Ornish has shown that it's only 2 to 3 weeks and you feel like a new person, and you lose weight and the cellular inflammation goes down, and then the precancerous changes. And by the way, those polyps they're always removing with colonoscopy, those are all caused by insulin-like growth factor. They're the beginning of bowel cancer. The answer isn't a colonoscopy every year or every 5 years. The answer is a diet that doesn't spike your blood sugar. Pretty easy, actually. I mean, it's not easy to carry out because that's all the foods in the airports and in the fast food places and so on. But once you learn that, you feel so good, and you realize you don't really need much medical care when you're taking your vitamins and you're eating low glycemic. Easy. Exercise is very interesting. You need some, but we know that the extreme athletes, the Ironman people, the marathon people that we look at, they actually die younger. That's too much exercise. So in general, I think that if you've got 30 minutes to an hour, 5 days a week, that would work well, and a walk is just fine. Now, there's other exercise that I think people need to do in this sedentary culture, and that is things like yoga and Pilates. The entire structural system of the body, the bones, the joints, the ligaments, the tendons, over time tend to get like this, and so people get like this as they're older, bent over. That's optional. I've actually gained an inch in height in the last 10 years, and it's from Pilates. So we lift things up. Also, in all the connective tissue, there are these things called Langhans cells, and they're connected to the bones and the joints. And when you do acupuncture, you actually create a little electrical current that goes through the entire body. So one episode of yoga, or if we can do it just now, so just sit and expand your sternum. Just see your sternum expanding here a bit, and breathe in deeply through your nose and expand your entire rib cage. That alone will improve your immunity, and it will begin to make you taller and put up a piezoelectric current throughout your entire body that changes everything. So exercise and bringing new space into your body all the time, seeing how far you can go, is extraordinarily beneficial. And what's fun about it is when you do a discipline, such as martial arts, Tai Chi, Pilates, yoga, any of those things, you keep getting better. So it belies the myth of aging, that after the age of 40, some people even believe 30, it's all downhill, and I've got these aches and pains because I'm 40 now, or I've got these aches and pains because I'm 50. All of that is wrong. We replace the cells in our bodies every 7 years. The problem is we keep replacing the cells using the same thoughts and beliefs that they had in the first place. So we need to bring in new oxygen, new ideas, new height, new everything. And you do that through exercise. We know weight training in women, highly beneficial for bone health. And we've also got studies that show that those women who exercise, and I forget exactly how much it is, I think it's an hour a day, 5 days a week, have a 70% decreased risk of breast cancer. This is what we should be teaching people. Not wearing the pinker than thou award all over the place as though you're just a sitting duck for this. No. And I don't think we should be looking for the cure. We've got the cure. It's to prevent it in the first place. Oh, hormones, such an interesting concept, because here's the problem. If you had healthy adrenals, healthy ovaries, going into menopause, which is not an event, it's a 6 to 13-year process, then your body would just make the transition and you'd go back to the hormone levels that you had at 9 or 10. Or let's assume that you're not having your period of 10, so 9 or 10. So there would always be some level of hormone in your body. Like, we don't call a 10-year-old a hormone deficient child. So you need hormones a certain way during your reproductive years. Now, you get to menopause, and a lot of women enter that life stage absolutely depleted, body, mind, and spirit. So their adrenals, even though the American Endocrine Society doesn't believe this, their adrenals are not functioning optimally because they've been overproducing the stress hormones cortisol and epinephrine for years and years and years. Inadequate sleep, and by the way, sleep is the #1 way to metabolize excess stress hormones. But many, many people in Western countries are getting by on not enough, 6 hours, 7 hours, and then they're in front of a computer all the time. So they arrive at this life stage depleted, and they have hot flashes that keep them awake. So with what little sleep they have, they're no longer getting. And the #1 gold standard way to deal with hot flashes is estrogen. And so for many women, they really require that in order to feel better, although there are some very good herbs that work nicely. One is Praeria mirifica, but you got to get the right kind because there's 100 different species, and the wild crafters have to get the right stuff. So if you arrive depleted, or you've had your ovaries removed, which is in the United States, 1 in 3 women will have a hysterectomy, with or without ovarian removal by the age of 60, and that changes her hormone levels, then you may need some hormones. Now, here's the big controversy. Do you need hormones to stay young and sexy forever? And you know there's a huge contingent in the so-called anti-aging movement. It's a term that I really detest. Anti-aging? You begin to age the moment you're born. So you want to be as healthy as possible for as long as possible. And I believe that if you are nutrienting properly and your vitamin D levels are good and you're exercising, then you can produce, and we have this data, that the inner portion of the ovary around menopause, the stroma inside will actually increase in size and produce more testosterone. So those women don't need anything. But you have to do all the lifestyle stuff. We give out hormones as though, and you remember when the Women's Health Initiative began in the early 90s, I said at the time, they're using the wrong hormone at the wrong dose for everybody. It was everyone into the pool, everyone's going to get Prem-Pro at this dose, and it's the wrong hormone. We are humans, not horses. Premarin, pregnant mare's urine. That was shocking to some women. And they thought this was going to prevent heart disease. And of course, it didn't. And in 2002, that Women's Health Initiative was stopped abruptly, and then women went cold turkey and suffered terribly. So where I am on that is middle of the road. Which hormone do you need? So there is DHEA from the adrenals. There's progesterone. There's estrogen. And then there's the androgens. Well, that's DHEA is one of the androgens. Some women need them, some women don't. But to make it like everyone needs this to prevent decrepitude is wrong. And also saying these are dangerous and no one should be on them is also wrong. There is a place for them, and if you're taking hormones, it should be the lowest dose that does the job, and it needs to be a combination. And we always forget progesterone. Progesterone is very calming. It binds to the GABA receptors in the brain, same place as Valium. And when we think hormone replacement as an OBGYN, you're taught, well, that's estrogen, as though the other two don't even exist. And progesterone is just a vacuum cleaner for the uterus to prevent the waxy buildup. But it's its own thing. And the first hormone to decrease when you start skipping ovulations is progesterone. So many women do beautifully during the perimenopausal years when they get premenstrual migraines and so on just a little progesterone. Also, we have really solid data from Kent Hermsmeyer's group at the Oregon Primate Center on the role of progesterone in coronary artery disease. So many women at midlife begin to get chest pain, and the coronary vessels in women are much smaller than in men. And transdermal progesterone will take care of that, and it will take care of angina. It's really, really, really important in those women who can't make the conversions of the cholesterol to the end products, the end sex steroids. So I guess I would say I am for the right kind of hormones in the right women. You know, what I would love to see is birth control done with melatonin or bioidentical hormones. Then I'd be all for it. But it's all synthetic hormones. And I have seen many, many women gain weight, get PMS. On the other hand, if you're not going to run your sex life like your checkbook, then you better be on the pill. If you're one of those people who's just, it's just like you're getting your MBA or you're in med school and you just don't want to think about it and you're not going to be conscious to use a condom or the diaphragm, then the pill is probably a lifesaver. Because what's worse than the possible side effects of the pill? A couple unwanted pregnancies. I did abortions for years. Believe me, I was on the front lines of that one. And then women, and I had a whole group of women, and they'd say, well, you know, birth control isn't natural. Yeah, well, neither is for abortions. So there's a place for that, and we have the ability to make birth control pills that would be much safer. Problem is, and we always go back to this, you cannot patent a naturally occurring hormone. So no drug company can make the money they need to make on the R&D of a naturally occurring hormone. So we're not going to see it. Those studies have been refuted because now we go back to the grief thing. It is not the termination of the pregnancy that increases the risk of breast cancer. It is the fact that the woman did not process the situation. So for instance, I stopped doing abortions, not because they were shooting abortion providers, because they weren't at the time. It was because I got tired of having women not taking responsibility for their end of the bargain and sort of leaving their bodies and being on the ceiling somewhere because they weren't present with what their behavior resulted in. And remember that our souls come to us through our bodies. And if you terminate a pregnancy, there's every cell in your body says, I should be present with this. I need to grieve this. This was a potential life. There's a whole lot of women who've never grieved the abortions. And if every woman who'd ever had an abortion stood up and said, I've had one, I was young, this would have wrecked my life at the time, if we could own that and grieve it, we would see no connection with, see, because this is unfinished business where it's heavy on your heart. You got to get things off your chest, or your chest will keep bringing you back to the scene of the crime until you forgive yourself. I had a woman come in once, I'll never forget this, and she said to me, "My breasts are being taken care of at the Leahy Clinic." And I said, "My breasts are being taken care of on my chest." It has to do with being medicalized almost since birth. You know that thing called well baby checks? I mean, if you're any kind of a mother and you have created this baby inside your own womb and your body has made that baby's eyes, that baby's heart, your body is pretty good at taking care of that baby inside. Well, then you are the mother and you had the placenta and all that stuff. You actually know. Any pediatrician will tell you, the mothers know when the baby's okay or not, when something's not right. So I've spent actually almost a lifetime trying to help women make that shift, that this business of you go to the doctor and you get a clean bill of health, which frankly means very little, and then they get mad because something came up. They must have missed it. You know, there's this idea, it's that it's Newtonian physics, not quantum physics. So you want to teach women that moment by moment, they're creating their own state of health. So what I would do with screening that would be really fun is this would be a brilliant opportunity to teach how you live day to day until the next screening. And then the screening, especially if it's a functional test where you can see how it trends toward health, is so empowering. I mean, something like thermography, you go, wow, look at your score. It went from whatever down to here. What have you been doing? And they'll tell you what they've been doing. And then the whole terrain changes. So you can educate at each screening instead of what we have now. And again, in a mammogram or an x-ray, it's there, it's not there, it's open to interpretation. And now with the high resolution digital mammograms, I mean, pretty much everyone's going to show up with something. And then we think, okay, we got it early. But the problem with this early diagnosis is that many, many times it will pick up something you would die with but never die from. The PSA in men is very much like the ductal carcinoma in situ in women. So I'm actually almost frightened of breast screening in women in their 40s because we have autopsy data showing that in women who died in car accidents, perfectly healthy women, 40% have ductal carcinoma of the breast if you section enough sections. And once someone knows that, they're told they have stage 0 cancer, and then you're out there with a pink ribbon and you've got yourself in the group that is the victim. And it's almost better if you didn't know that. Whereas if you have something like a thermogram and it shows that you're trending toward something that may become something else. But of course, the reason thermography hasn't caught on is it doesn't tell the surgeon where to cut because it's functional. It shows a condition in the body. But if you got that, maybe in addition to a mammogram, then you can watch it change. And frankly, I've seen mammograms change where, the surgeon went in where the calcifications were, and then they had another screening before the surgery to put the needles in properly, and all the calcifications were gone. See, people don't realize this. Stuff goes away. The body heals itself if you allow it to. But the problem with the screening is, once you've got a thing or a bad blood test or whatever, it is human nature to focus on that. And then by the law of attraction, and Napoleon Hill said in the 30s, thoughts have the peculiar quality of becoming their physical equivalents. So you got to be really careful about screening because it is not benign. Everyone thinks it's benign. We should get total body scans, or we should have that blood test that tells us, do we have cancer somewhere? Where are you going to cut? What drug are you going to give? Where are you going to give it? And I don't think that the average person understands the dilemma that is for doctors who are called upon, do something, cut it out, cure me, when the cure, the answer, is inside them. And it's our job as physicians, I think, to empower them to turn on the health promoting properties of their own bodies, because the biggest pharmacy you're ever going to find is the mind and the body working together with the divine.
So do you think DCIS should be classified?
I'm not in that field, but it bothers me what I've seen with DCIS and calling it stage 0 cancer. It's very much like the parallel construction would be cervical dysplasia. We know that 50% of mild cervical dysplasia goes away on its own. So women are told, you have cervical dysplasia and it's precancerous. All they hear is, I have cervical cancer. And we know, and now we've got that test for women, the HPV test, human papillomavirus. So that's a DNA probe that's making someone a ton of money, when in fact, within 2 years, in a healthy individual, the immune system will have cleared the HPV from the system. And whatever changes were there will just go away. It's like we're talking out of both sides of our mouth, because now the American College of OBGyn says you don't need to intervene on these mild dysplasias on young people because they'll go away on their own. On the other hand, everyone's terrified now of HPV because it's been told that's the cause of cervical cancer. It's not the cause of cervical cancer. It's like the buzzards with roadkill. They're around because some animal died. HPV is around because your immune system is not working properly. And if you want your immune system working properly, you got to give your body some live messages. You're okay, and you got to get your vitamin D up and take the antioxidants and the vitamin C. Lo and behold, the body goes, thank you. I know how to handle this. It's very exciting. Again, I think this seeing breast cancer in younger women is from several reasons. One, because their mothers have been afraid of the sun, the vitamin D levels are lower even in utero. And we know that as the breast is forming, or the breast tissue is forming in adolescence and so on, this is the Garland brothers' work, we need that vitamin D for healthy breast development. So young women are not getting it. We know that the diet has changed so radically in the last 50 years that each generation is becoming genetically weaker and weaker and weaker. So we've got the adult onset diabetes in 8-year-olds, and then the cellular inflammation that goes along with that. And as a young girl's breasts are formed, we also know that the breasts have gotten bigger, again, from the too much sugar in the diet and the insulin-like growth factor. So again, though, because the body is self-healing, if you can decrease the cellular inflammation and the environment in which the breast is finding itself, and also iodine, I failed to mention, is a huge factor in breast health. We have almost a worldwide pandemic of inadequate iodine levels. In the United States, people are no longer using iodized salt. Again, iodine was put in the salt to prevent goiter. Another example of, you're not seeing a lot of goiters, but we're seeing a lot of breast cancer. And we know that the breast actively pumps iodine into cell tissue. It interacts with estrogen in a balanced way, and breast tissue gets healthier. Any woman with fibrocystic breast disease, breast pain, and so on, when she takes iodine and supplements, oftentimes the pain goes away. But we have fluoride in the water, chlorine in the water, bromide in the bread. These are all halogens, and they push iodine off the cells. So you got to start drinking pure water, supplementing with iodine, doing the antioxidant vitamins. And then there's the big one, which is get your body mass index down to 24 or below. 25 I could live with, but people really are too fat. And what is body fat? It is a hormone factory, and it's the wrong kind of hormone, which overstimulates the breast. So that's really the reason why we're seeing all of these diseases in younger and younger people. Hypertension in children now, but they're all really from the same general cause. The thyroid, many of the thyroid conditions are from lack of iodine. They're also from something else. This is fifth chakra. This is self-expression, creativity, will, and timing. Timing affects the thyroid, and many, many people believe there's not enough time. I'm running out of time. I don't have time. And it changes the body clock, and it affects us adversely in this area. But it is the connection between all the endocrine hormones that creates an imbalance that would cause an overstimulation of ductal cells in breast cancer. We also know, of course, not all breast cancer is the same. So there are different types. But in general, the vast majority are the ones that are associated with these environmental factors. But remember, the biggest environmental factor, and this is, see, I don't want women to get all, you become victimized by, well, this stuff is in the water and this stuff is in the soil and this is why I got it. The biggest chemical factory in your body is this. It's the way you think and what you choose to focus on. And when you make your connection with your true power, which is your connection to divinity, God, whatever you want to, source energy might be better so I don't get stuck in religion. When you make that connection, that's when miracles begin to happen. And you make that connection first, because otherwise you're trying to force yourself to stop sugar, stop alcohol, exercise. Your ego can't be forced to do it. You've got to bring in more of your soul, and then that'll want to do it. You know, people would, I've always been fascinated with the literature on near-death experience and Ray Moody's work and the work out at the Swedish Children's. And what they find with people who've had a near-death experience is that they take care of themselves. They're no longer afraid to die, so that's not the issue. They begin to cherish their bodies and this life and see it as precious. And that's why they exercise, and that's why they take care of themselves. Not from fear. Very different motivation than, oh, I shouldn't do this, but I really want to. You know the ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study by Vincent Felitti out of Kaiser Permanente in San Diego. Felitti was running a weight loss clinic, and he found that the people who were losing weight successfully were the most likely to drop out of the program. And then he overheard an 18-year-old woman who had gained 100 pounds say, overweight is overlooked, and that's what I need to be. And she had been raped. So Felitti points out that the overweight, the smoking, the alcohol is not the problem. It's the solution. And once we know that that's the solution, then you bring in spirit. Every 12-step program starts with step 1. We admitted we were powerless over whatever it is. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, turned our lives over to that power. Well, that's the greater part of ourselves. That's source energy. It's not the great pumpkin out there somewhere. It's part of us. When you bring that in, you realize you do have the power and the strength to turn this stuff around. When I used to teach medical students, I would say to them, the shaman's cloak is on your shoulders. You have tremendous power. You don't know the power you have when you walk in with a stethoscope and your white coat. you are suddenly the authority, and you have the power to empower them. So every word you say holds far more weight than anyone else. So what I tell women is, check out the physician or the nurse practitioner or whatever for healing potential. Do you feel cared for when you're in the presence of that person? Is he or she a healer? Your body will know it. And in fact, if that person is a healer, I swear, it almost doesn't matter what they give you. And because if you trust your doctor, when I'm talking to women, let's say with breast cancer, about what is your treatment, and they'll say, I'm going to such and such, I love my team. I know they're going to do well because the team, it's a healing environment for them. And there's an old saying, community equals immunity. And when we know we're not in this alone and someone else cares for us, the healing potential of that is immeasurable. And it's way more. I have a cousin who did a lot of third world medicine with aid to international development, and he'd talk about people who came in to create health projects in various areas of the world. And he said, invariably, the government would try to ramp up their program because it was so good they wanted to duplicate it, and it was never about the program. It was always about the person running it. Always. When a person has this wholehearted desire to heal and can enfold his or her patients in that, you feel it. You know, the electromagnetic field of the heart is 500 times at least bigger than the electromagnetic field of the brain. So this one's picked up on the EEG, this is picked up on the EKG, but this one, they say you can measure the Dalai Lama's heart, a mile out before he gets there. That is an electromagnetic field that, when we're in it, entrains our own hearts and improves our immunity and makes us have hope. You can't begin to measure this. And I would say, it's more important than food. It's more important than anything. It's the most important thing. Well, it was a huge study that they did in China, where they had a bunch of workers in factories. And they found that the women who were trained to do breast self-exam found far more lesions, but most of them were benign, and it didn't save any lives. Therefore, everyone said the breast self-exam is worthless. Now, you have to reframe the breast self-exam, because the way it was taught is this: make your hands into 2 minesweepers, and then begin to feel your breasts to see if there's anything that might kill you. Okay, do you think if you taught men to do that with their testicles once a month, you think they would do that? Okay, so here's what you're going to do, because you're going to find it and it's going to kill you. No. So what you want to do instead, the hands are embryologically connected to the same segment that creates the heart. So our hands are extensions of our heart. So they have huge energy healing potential. So you take these 2 hands when you're in the shower every morning or wherever you are, and you understand that they have great healing power, and then you simply send healing energy to the breast. Now up here we have the tail of Spence. This is where most cancers are found, but it's where all the lymph is, all the lymph nodes. So just massage this, move the lymph. It contains the waste products that are on their way out. You can move it and just be kind to your breast. Do some nice massage, maybe with oil. I would have at least a monthly massage ritual that you do for health, not to find something, but to bring health and healing into this area. Then you would find that you've transformed the breast self-exam, because you know that as you're doing this, you're healing the entire area. Now that's empowering, and that's what I would teach. Well, if you think about the breast and the function of the breast, when you've had a baby and all the milk comes in and so on, then and you keep nursing in this way, that the more children you have, the more you breastfeed, the lower your risk of breast cancer. We know that because it is a respite from the hormonal cyclic stimulation of the breast, just in the most scientific terms. But also, when you breastfeed, you get a baby's little hands always caressing your breasts, and so you're getting a lot of love and attention to the breasts. Now, starting in the 50s, women were told that breastfeeding was primitive and that we could do better. Friend of mine, her mother said, "We are not cows." And so we've had this very peculiar relationship with breastfeeding. Or another woman said, well, my husband doesn't want me to breastfeed because my breasts are his, and he doesn't want to ruin my breasts. And I think, what kind of man doesn't want the absolute best food for his children? I mean, it's like inconceivable. And frankly, if I had a vaccine to give to women so that they'd be able to get antibodies against such a man, I would give it. Anyhow, we know that the number one predictor of whether or not a woman breastfeeds is whether or not she gets approval from her maternal grandmother. It's a legacy of breastfeeding in families where they see it, then it's normal, and you've watched your mother, and so you're going to do it. Like, my daughters were both breastfed for 2 years, and they will, of course, breastfeed, and it's just the most natural thing in the world. And I breastfed in medical meetings 29 years ago. No one, you just do it. You put a thing over, Why is this a big deal? There is no question that as we bring back the womanly art of breastfeeding, and as we reclaim these breasts as a phenomenal source of nourishment, not to mention tooth and jaw development, breastfeeding babies actually have a much broader oral palate. There's less need for braces in the kid, and the entire oropharynx development is better so that they're not mouth breathers. Any ENT physician will tell you that, because you're meant to milk the breast with your tongue, and then the whole development of the orofacial cavity is much better. You're prettier. Kids who are breastfed can be more attractive. I'd really any study on that. It just makes sense to me. So when you have the legacy where you're terrified that someone will see you breastfeeding, then that's another area where you need to bring yourself into the present moment. And that said, there are women who will listen to me talk and it won't make a bit of difference because they can't imagine doing that, because either from sexual abuse or whatever, they don't own this area of their bodies. And for some women, that's okay. Just get formula and make sure it's got omega-3 fats. It took them about 25 years to add those to formula, and that's absolutely important for the development of the eyes, the immune system, and the heart. But breastfeed. I mean, 2-3 years, they'll wean before they go to college. It's fine.
There was a talk that in I believe somewhere in 1970s, that the industry was powerful enough that 95% of women were not breastfeeding because they've convinced them that breast milk is not sterile.
Yeah, that's about right. See, we've got this idea. Again, germs are the enemy. How do we sell so much of that stuff that you wipe on, shopping carts and all of that? We need to understand that the best thing that can happen to a baby is that it can get colonized with your bacteria. We have more bacteria in our bodies than we do cells. And when you've breastfed a baby and you know what those breastfeeding stools smell like and look like, it's entirely different. They don't even stink. It's only when you add the other food that suddenly the stool and the microenvironment of the gut is completely changed. Now, this is interesting. Breast milk itself actually changes your ability to know what's safe, what isn't safe, because the food that a baby's fed in its early years entrains the immune system, and it also affects the development of the gut. Now we have all these food allergies, all these kids with asthma. But if they got the food, breast milk is living food, and it changes depending on the age of the child, and there are antibodies in there to the very germs that are in the environment. It's unbelievably intelligent. And the fact that we could talk women into thinking that the formula makers are more intelligent, better living through chemistry, is insane. But that pendulum is swinging now, which is good. Again, it would have to do with the diet of these countries, the fact that these are modern women who don't breastfeed as long, or maybe don't breastfeed at all. And it's all the environmental stuff. You know, it's interesting, we know that women in Japan have a very low incidence of breast cancer. When they move to Hawaii, their incidence goes up. And when they move to mainland United States, their incidence after, 5 years, is as high as every North American woman. So much for genetics. I mean, you could say, well, women in Japan don't get breast cancer because genetically they're different, except for when they move here. And then we're back to the fact that it is the cell membrane that is transducing the environment into the genes. And it is the behavior, it's the food, it's all of that. You know, in Japan, they eat a huge amount of seaweed. They have a very iodine-rich diet. That's just one factor. It's a relatively low-fat diet, but a lot of fish. So a lot of omega-3 fats, which are anti-inflammatory. All of that stuff. But then also, there's the isolation of the North American culture. You know, if you look at Okinawa, in the movie Happy, where they followed the people on Okinawa to find out why they're so happy, number one, and why they live so long. You know, they're they live into their beyond 100, but very healthy. Well, they have community stuff, and when little kids run a race, all the grandmothers go. You don't have to have your own genetic kid in the race. They all run, and the kids come and hug them. Everyone's out working in their gardens all the time, and they have a community center where all ages group. We have this stupid thing that we do in North America. Well, this is for teenagers. And then this is what you should, we do things by demographics, you know. Well, people age 50 to 65 like this stuff, and people over 70 like this stuff. Instead of, we need a community where every age group is represented. Remember, community equals immunity. So let's say that you live in India and your whole family sort of lives together and everyone sees each other, and then you come over here and you become an MBA, or you're a computer person and you're at work 12 hours a day, and then you go home and you're isolated. That's a very different environment than living in the arms of your family, your extended family, where someone's always there to pick up the slack if you get sick or if the kids need something. We need to live far more communally, but I think what's happening is we need chosen communities, not just, okay, this is your family, this is what they do, because a lot of times families are not healthy. They keep people stuck. So we're in the era of the chosen intentional community, like these are my people, and these people I can rely on, and I see that happening more and more and more, and that is going to change the genetic components as well, because you're going to be awash with the hormones of the neurotransmitters of belonging. You need to, most gangs are just about belonging. That's all. All the rituals, they need to belong. So safety and security, but a sense of belonging. And that changes immunity dramatically. I like what you've said there, which is it depends on what you're going to do with the information. Now, with some women, they are so afraid. They're so afraid, and they can't seem to get over it. And in those cases, a preventive mastectomy may prevent what a doctor friend of mine calls surveillance fatigue, where you just get sick of worrying about it. But on the other hand, with a technology such as thermography added to the mix, you'd be far more apt to know where things are going. So what we really need is much better screening mechanisms that are functional. Again, instead of waiting for you've got it, you don't have it yet. We see the continuum. Well, you know, the paradigm is working, by the way, with prostate cancer now. One of my colleagues, Dr. Aaron Katz, who was head of the holistic urology department at Columbia in New York, has a program of active surveillance. So men with prostate cancer, he points out 90% never go outside the capsule, and you can do active surveillance with, you do vitamins and exercise and so on, and he finds that not only does that keep the prostate cancer from growing, it often reverses it altogether. Now, that's the paradigm that I would like to see with breast cancer, because that's where we need to go, that same place. Active surveillance, not, all right, we're cutting off the breast and then giving you something like tamoxifen or Arimidex, stuff with awful side effects for women. Our whole society works in the strangest way. It's the illusion of control, the illusion that, I think it's all based on an outmoded medical model, which is the germ theory of disease. And even Louis Pasteur, on his deathbed, said, Antoine Beauchamp was right, I was wrong. It is not the germ, it's the environment. And again, it's not the gene. This is another thing. We now have this thing, genetic determinism. Well, I'll get my genes checked, and then, it'll tell me what I'm likely to die of. Or this is another powerless thing. Well, this runs in my family. Heart disease runs in my family. Sure it does, and so do all of the dietary behaviors and all of the couch potato behaviors and all of the thoughts and all of that. That's what runs in your family. Bruce Lipton points out that it is not the nucleus of the cell where the genes are that determines cellular behavior. It's the cell membrane. The cell membrane is the brain of the cell. And the cell membrane is influenced by your thoughts, by the environment, and so on. So this business of disease screening, that health is created by going to your doctor every year and to be screened for disease, is insane, in my opinion. I don't do it. I know too much. You don't just go and let's say that you do find something. Then what are your options in conventional medicine? Take a drug. Like if you have high blood pressure, take a drug. Okay, you and I both know there are times when that's important, but you need to ask yourself, why is the blood pressure high? It's not a deficiency of hydrochlorothiazide or whatever the flavor of the month is. Or, why is this happening? A headache is not an aspirin deficiency. So you have to ask those questions, because what we have is a system run by the pharmaceutical industry and new and better surgical procedures. So now the big thing in hospitals is you need to have a robotic way to take out whatever, a uterus. They've got the robot. Yeah, well, it's still a hysterectomy. And chances are there's alternatives to that hysterectomy. Doesn't matter how fancy you get with taking it out. It's the same thing. Or, doing breast biopsies, more and better ways to remove abnormal tissue, when in fact we know that by the time breast cancer is diagnosed, it's systemic already. It's an imbalance in the whole body. This is just showing up here. And with a technology like thermography, like the functional technologies, you see, that's where the paradigm is going. You can take a look at things, or even a lipid profile, and you look and you see that with each decade of life, the HDL cholesterol, the good cholesterol, is going down, the triglycerides are going up. You don't have to be a cardiovascular surgeon to say, hey, wait, when you were 25, your HDL was 80, and you're 35 and your HDL is now 40, we know what that trend is. We know that your arteries are already getting blocked. Actually, the Bogalusa heart study found lipid streaks in the arteries of children, and that was years ago. Now we have so-called adult onset diabetes in 8-year-olds. Now, all that cellular inflammation that is in an 8-year-old is the setup for breast cancer later. And you can intervene now. So our system is not sustainable, just going for the thing that we're going to cut out. Oh, he got it all. He cut it out and I've got a clean bill of health. It's like, if you cut it out here and you've ignored the cause, it's going to show up somewhere else. So deal with the body, mind, spirit of the thing now. Do you know that we have documented evidence of spontaneous remission from every known disease? And if you talk to those people, every one of them, almost, not all of them, every one of them had a conversion experience where they changed their whole life. And then, and this is always interesting to me, not one of them wanted to avoid death. They stopped fighting. They began to see what their divine nature was. They began to meditate and go inward and so on. And then sometimes the cancer just goes away. But that wasn't the point. It's like John Gabriel in the movie Hungry for Change, where he said, well, I got to 420 pounds. And I pulled over on the New Jersey Turnpike and I realized as long as my body wanted to be fat, there was nothing I could do about it. My body wanted to be fat. So I said to myself, okay, I just don't want to gain any more. I'm happy with 420. But let me eat healthier. I'll add wheat germ to the chocolate brownie or whatever it was, until gradually he became healthier and healthier and healthier, and now looks like Adonis from 420 pounds, all from a conversion experience where it's almost like God comes in and says, hey, there's another way to do it. And you get your power back. It's an inside. It begins as an inside job.
Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this interview. You can own your own personal copy of this and the entire Breast Cancer Prevention Global Virtual Conference series in your own library. Listen and watch at your own pace and review this important information as often as you'd like. We've made it available for purchase on our conference website. Own your own copy now.